What's up, everybody? Brothers, sisters, psychonauts, and seekers of truth. It is Ananka, and welcome to my bazaar. Today, I have a 25I-NBOMe trip report for you. The title of this trip report is This is What I Was Looking For, and was submitted to Erowid in 2012 by the user Coolum. With all that being said, let our story begin. I have experimented with NBOMe previously around 8 to 9 times on blotters placed between my upper lip and gum. My experiences have been largely positive, but I have noticed certain undesirable effects, such as sleeplessness as well as nausea on the come up. It usually goes away. Also, I have noticed that if I redose within a week of my experience, I will have small breakouts on my face that go away within a few days. My highest dose on the substance has been 4 milligrams on 8 blotters, which resulted in a trip unlike any I have ever had before. I have tried to replicate this trip, but have been unable to do so until my last experience. The only difference separating these trips from my others is the fact that I used a sonic toothbrush and thoroughly brushed my gums prior to use. I had hoped that by roughing up my gums a bit, the NBOMe would come on quickly and more strongly. The result was an intense and overwhelming come-up that became a very spiritual and fulfilling experience. T+0. Thoroughly destroyed my gums with my toothbrush. Proceeded to place 5 blotters along my upper gum. 15 minutes in, very faint visuals. Confusion comes on very quickly. Thinking slows down to a halt and paranoia begins to creep in slightly. At the time, I was beginning to get a bit scared as the effects were coming on extremely fast. 30 minutes in, oh my God, what have I done? Nausea is hitting me in full force, and I cannot fight the thought that I may have taken too much and poisoned myself in some way. My roommate walks in at this point. He is aware of me taking the NBOMe and begins to get on his laptop. The visuals are beginning to become more solid at this point and moving very rapidly along the walls. 45 minutes in. Who are they? The visuals at this point are no longer restricted to the walls. They consist mainly of beings that appear as paper chain people moving in waves all throughout the room. They look at me with the most absurd expressions, some of them smiling with a shit-faced grin, and the others with a blank expression. Also, at this point, I am noticing the usual temperature effects in which my body continuously switches between very warm and cold. 55 minutes in. It is much harder to see at this point. The room I am in is becoming very bright, and my thoughts are becoming extremely disjointed. At this point, I can feel that I am on the verge of ego death. I'm laughing uncontrollably at the chain beings and keep on yelling, "It's those same motherfuckers." My roommate looked at me and asked what I meant by that, at the point to which I can't remember my response. Thoughts are almost an impossibility to form, and my grip on reality at this point is blasted to pieces. Looking at my body, there are visuals that are reminiscent of Kingdom Hearts, if anyone here has ever played it. with strange, incomprehensible English words wrapping around my arms. An hour in, looking out the window, I've noticed this in other trip reports, but haven't seen it for myself until now. The scenery outside changes from day to night and back to day again. By now, the visuals are only getting stronger, and it's as if there's a whole new spectrum of colors that remind me of neon lights. Looking at my roommate, it appears as though we are travelers on a ship, sailing through an endless ocean. I attempt to tell him, but the effort required to speak in coherent sentences is too much, and so I simply continue to enjoy the visuals. An hour and 5 minutes in the area in front of me, it appears as if a malevolent serpent is swimming towards me, wriggling at a very fast pace. Surprisingly, I'm not scared, and watch it for a few moments until I begin to stare up at the ceiling. Rapidly, the scenery begins to morph and change into a completely brand new setting. I stare directly up, and the ceiling becomes infinitely tall, as if I gained an extra degree of vision, and spirits everywhere are rising up into the infinite ceiling. I am in complete awe. An hour and 3 minutes in. No, that's impossible. You can't tell me all of that happened within 8 minutes, is what I say to my roommate at this point. Time dilation is in full gear at this point, and the past 8 minutes appears to have been thousands of years. The serpent I saw earlier is coming closer at this point, and so I, with the aid of the chain beings, begin to go on a long journey creating multiple worlds and mazes in order to confuse the serpent and evade it. Every now and then, in between worlds, I would come back to reality briefly and check the time. Eventually, that no longer became a concern, as I completely forgot about the concept of time. With each new world and maze I created, I am struck with very profound spiritual realizations and answers to questions I have had on my previous trips. Unfortunately, I forgot them all. It's times like these that I recommend me and my friends carry audio recorders for these trips and simply shout out our realizations when they come to us. I begin to see that the worlds and visuals are made up of some sort of logic and find myself on the cusp of understanding it. Around 2 hours in, fuck yes, I am God. I am completely loving this. I finally understood the logic of the worlds and gained full control of the chain beings, shaping them into the world around me. The trip is beginning to hit its peak at this point, and thus I end my journey, or in some cases playdate with the serpent, by trapping it in a chained loop of worlds. I also begin to see that the worlds I created were different parts of my body. I am filled with utter bliss at this point, and I never want it to end. 3 hours in, another being enters at this point, much more distinct and wholly appearing than all of the other visuals. We gaze at each other, and then together begin to create the most beautiful thing I have ever seen in my life. We played and created for what seemed like forever, until I lurched back into reality. I found myself lying in bed, crying from the sheer beauty of it all and longing for the other being again. 4 hours and 7 minutes in, I'm finally starting to come down from the peak of the experience. The visuals are still strong with the paper chain beings. I find that I'm still able to exercise some control over them, but not to the same extent as earlier. At this point, I am somewhat bored and still very nostalgic about the experience with the serpent and the other being earlier. I find myself a bit thirsty, so I go and grab a drink, which is very difficult. 4 hours and 16 minutes in. I hadn't realized my roommate left earlier, but he came back knocking on the door. Apparently, he forgot his keys, so I'm stumbling with great difficulty to reach the door and get it open. Once he comes in, he decides to vape some weed in the room. I decide to take 2 small hits from the vape. 4 hours and 31 minutes in, things got a bit stranger at this point. Looking at my roommate, he appeared to be a very foreign person. He was surrounded by stereotypical gray and green aliens with sombreros and ponchos as he was vaping the weed. When he would speak, it would sound as if he was speaking with a very strange accent. The visuals take on a more eye-like appearance, and I begin to hear some of the strangest sounds I have ever heard. At this point, I'm very glad I didn't vape more than I had. After this, things were simply becoming less intense. It did feel as though there was a conflict between the NBOMe and marijuana. But other than that, it's more of the same. I had trouble sleeping, but simply browsed through the internet until I fell asleep. The next day, I am extremely tired physically and mentally, but feel rather refreshed, as though someone untangled all the wires in my mind. I still do miss the beings and the feeling of being God at the peak, but the desire to redose is not very strong. No breakouts, and I feel very hungry. I'm having a little trouble speaking, as though my throat is a bit sticky, but it eventually goes away later that day. Conclusion: a very rewarding experience. Bravo, NBOMe. Bravo. After this experience, I believe that I will repeat the method of brushing my gums roughly before administering the NBOMe. However, I do feel that the come-up is significantly rougher and may lead to a bad experience. Alright, everybody. That is the end of our story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Share with us your 25I-NBOMe experiences down in the comments. Check out the other playlists on my channel, and I will see you in the next one, fam. Deuces.